Hi, Julia.
Hello, hi.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a really busy day, but it's nice to be back in the space.
I know.
And talking to you.
And just catching the last of the evening light at Threshold Sculpture. So today we're just going to chat a little bit about your practice and also your exhibition here at Threshold Sculpture.
Yeah.
So your exhibition's entitled Scoria, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Scoria. And it's my work is in the space, but also that there's a text that is a companion to the work by Jacob Farrell, which,
Yeah. Got it. And it's called A Snake-Shaped Key.
Yeah. And Jacob and I we've been, I guess, like having conversations from, Jacob lives in the south of France, so we've been talking remotely for the last, I guess, like 6 months, and I didn't realise, I guess, throughout that journey how much those conversations, I think, informed what we both produced for the show. So yeah,
Nice.
we met at art school originally, so
Okay.
it was nice to get to work together again.
Yeah, and just reacquainted with like a writing commission. I always think it's really nice when writing commissions kind of accompany shows. I think they add just a bit more layers, a few more layers into the work.
Yeah, I definitely felt I'd been doing a lot of writing last year, and I thought I just really needed to be making and not actually trying to verbalise everything that I was doing all the time. So, and Jacob's just always we've always found, I think, talking to each other very useful. So he was like, when I knew I could get him involved, it was really exciting.
Yeah. I guess so. To start with, Jacob in his text talks about onomatopoeic objects, and I think that really kind of sums up your exhibition, really, in the fact that all of the terms that he uses are really sonic and have quite sonic properties to them. So that kind of to start it up, really, and then slag and clinker as well are kind of the world's first pollutants, which I think is a really, really interesting starting point to the work. So, why are these, such impure leftovers kind of interesting to you?
I came across slag for the first time doing research into foundries, and I was really interested in the metal casting process, but I was really drawn to the slag heap that was just outside the foundry, and how natural the slag looked. It looked exactly like volcanic rock that I'd encountered in Iceland when I was on a residency there, and I guess it was that kind of tension between it. I knew it was essentially a human-made product, and has come through a really kind of industrial mass production, but for me it was just fooling me completely as being a kind of a man-made volcanic rock. And then that just kind of took me on a little bit of a journey, really finding out a bit more about it. I'm like less knowledgeable about clinker. I think Jacob is something that he was looking into a little bit more. But it's something that literally permeates the earth everywhere in the UK, or anywhere that's had any kind of human activity, because all kind of metal fabrication processes produces it a little bit. So you get archaeometallurgy is like a niche within archaeology, and they specifically study kind of all of the waste products from foundries and furnaces.
That's super interesting.
Which I really enjoy. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Super interesting. And it's kind of like the trickster of the natural world, of the, industrial practices, really. It's like a trickster, mimic kind of thing.
I guess because I've always quite liked experimenting with those processes in the studio that kind of imitate those in nature, that you kind of have these uncontrolled reactions in print or in sculpture, and so I guess I saw slag as a way of exploring that in a particular direction.
Your sculptural practice spans geologic materials, but biological forms, and kind of interaction with industrial production. So as these byproducts, is it important to you that you make the most of this excess wastage in terms of maybe environmental sustainability?
It's interesting to work with something that's essentially considered a waste. There are uses for it. It's kind of used as an aggregate in building. So it's kind of something that is always used up, but it also has a very, very low value. So there's no issue kind of for me to negotiate with a foundry to use some of it. It's essentially just, it's like sawdust, but they've got to do something with it. But it is a nice kind of bonus that it's making use of something that would otherwise just be essentially buried under a road somewhere. Mm-hmm. But then that's quite a good use for it too. It doesn't have, I'm not sure if it's particularly toxic material, but I think it's something quite nice about bringing it forward and looking at it, trying to look at it or reimagine it as a precious material. Because I guess it's used, if I think about it, how archaeologists deal with it, it's kind of helping them piece together our history, kind of shows you who's lived where and what they were doing. So it always has a bit of history to it. And this slag and this exhibition has come from an iron foundry in Huddersfield, and they literally never stop working. Their furnace runs every week, every year until they stop working forever. So it's very specific slag to them. I'm not sure I'm sure if I worked with a different foundry it would look slightly different.
But they do look really, really precious, with these kind of iridescent bubbles. They look liquidy, but then, textures between glossy and matte, and they're so slippery. And I feel like you kind of brought that out a little more in the work. And I kind of want to really explore and reference the kind of display structures that you use, and actually the exploration between them both, almost like, with the steel, and it's like a prop for the objects, but also it's part of the work in itself. Your steel work appears to be a display, but also part of some kind of natural armature for the objects. And in that, there's a really interesting balance between what's a prop, and also a lot of the armatures take the form of natural kind of shapes and shells as well. So I just want to ask about the balance between the two. I've
spent so much time looking at mollusks in the last few years that even when I'm not really trying to, their mollusky shapes are coming out in the work. And I think it will for a little bit longer until I've worked it out of my system. But I'm really, display structures and those kind of visible but invisible ways that you hold a sculpture in space, and that kind of, I guess, hierarchy or lack of hierarchy between an object or drawing or something and the way that you're then displaying it in the gallery is something that I kind of think I've thought about for a long time. One of my lecturers at college at Darlington pointed out to me really early on in my MA and was talking about how you can kind of manipulate that relationship a little bit, and there's kind of devices for making things present but also recede into the background, and so that was something that I've definitely been playing with for the last few years, and steel is, I guess, the way that I do that in my practice. It's a material that I find really fits with my way of working because you can be so spontaneous with it, and it's also incredibly strong, and it has that visual link as well to museum armatures and those kind of support structures that that are holding these precious objects for viewers to see and to understand. So it kind of really fits within the way I like to work, but also has that link to kind of museum culture and collections. And I spend a lot of time in archives and things, so that it often feeds my work. So so I had a really productive time in the metal workshop this year making these, and I'm they're quite satisfying still to me, which is a good sign. But
they really change the way we look at the mass and the weight and the presence of the works, I think. And some of them, look like they're very established and have been there for a long time, but then some other ones where you've elevated them in other ways look, very different. So I guess there's the weight part of it as well.
Yeah, it's kind of, some of these are kind of hands raising things up for you to look at them more closely, and then other areas are more like hooks or devices to kind of have more spontaneous objects that I can kind of play with, that depending on different variations of the work in the future. I can kind of change how things are installed, because I kind of definitely make, the way that I work is always making things in series, and I'm never really sure what's going to go in a show. I keep on making and producing more objects and structures and things that have kind of multiple ways of being used, and then once I'm in the space, that kind of works itself out and the show kind of emerges. So I think, were I to show this again, it would look potentially quite different. I might add things or take things away.
So my next question is actually kind of reflecting a little bit on your experience as an artist, but also as a curator for the first time in this space. Not just maybe starting off with curating for your own exhibition, but also what's it like to, work with other artists in this role?
Yeah, I worked on an exhibition for Index Festival in 2019 called Kuroko. That was, I guess, like my first formal attempt at curating or producing an exhibition, and that was a group exhibition of artists that all had a connection through having lived or studied in Japan, and that we had this international exchange together, and we were all working in sculpture, and that I guess the experience I had working on that show revealed to me a few things, and one was that I really enjoyed working with other artists and giving them the chance to push their work or try something new, or just an opportunity to get their work seen in a different place or a different environment. And also I just really got the feeling that we really lacked a little bit of exhibition space here in Leeds. We've got lots of artists and not a huge amount of space to show in anyway, and certainly not those kind of in-between spaces between kind of a studio gallery and a big institution. So that kind of got my brain working about what I could do that might provide a bit of a longer kind of infrastructure for shows. And my front garden was empty and has this quite strange plinth-like quality to it, which just kind of, it seemed like a natural fit for exhibitions of sculpture. And so that's where I thought about doing Threshold, and got the ball rolling with that really about a year ago.
What does Threshold Sculpture offer the local community, and also, what's the reception been like from people who've seen the show, who live and are based kind of in the area?
Well, what I wanted it to be certainly was a way for people to see sculpture in a very everyday, ordinary situation. Something that they didn't have to go out of their way really to find, but could just walk past on their way to work or to school, or just their daily walk. I mean, we started the project in April 2020, so we were just coming out of that big lockdown we'd had in the winter, and it was one of the first things actually really that you could probably do quite safely, was go for a walk and see some outdoor sculpture. You didn't really need to worry about COVID too much. So we've had, I think, quite a nice response, and people quite often stop for a chat and ask what's going on when we're installing. Or I just met 2 new people that moved to the next street along, who'd gone to recycle their glass up the road and had never walked down the street before, and then we've been here setting up the film and started a conversation. So that was really nice.
Nice.
Those spontaneous moments are really fun. But also, I guess there's an old man that walks past 4 or 5 times a day, and I say hi to him most days, and he sees the show every day. I don't know, it's kind of those it's kind of little and often maybe for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, Asda's just down the road, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's a place where more genuine, authentic engagements can happen.
Yeah, I'm sure that for some people it's quite a surprise, but then we also have really big audience of artists that live in the city and are looking for things to go and see and do, and it's kind of adding to that as well. Yeah, I mean, our first exhibition was Alice Chandler. She's an artist that lives literally down the road from me here in Burley, so when we were planning the show we could have doorstep meetings while we were still supposed to be in lockdowns. And
so what are the kind of biggest challenges that you've had when exhibiting and installing outside?
I was quite nervous about safety and how the works would survive a month of British weather, and whether it would have what kind of impact or effect it might have on people, whether there'd be kind of anger or animosity towards it. But that actually kind of, I think, resolved itself quite early on, and so far so good, and people like what we're showing. And I guess I'm learning, and the artists, we're all learning together about what works for an outdoor setting, and actually quite a lot works if you're only showing things for a few weeks. It's not like we're installing a permanent sculpture in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Things can be quite temporary here, and Alice Chandler's work in the first exhibition was a quilt, or part of it was a quilt. And so even things like textile can be quite suitable for outdoors, as long as you're not too precious about it kind of staying fresh or brand new. Yeah, I think running an artist-led space is just quite, you've always got to juggle other responsibilities, and working in a very small team we're trying to do quite a big thing, I guess. So there's lots of very like nitty-gritty admin and planning and trying to be, that's all quite hard sometimes, but it's also really fun. So.
Yeah, it feels really responsive and agile and fresh as well. I think this is definitely what Leeds needed. Just an extra slice of fun that's just on the threshold. And I think you've done an amazing job with it.
Thanks, Georgia.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. Okay.